Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Crafting and Crime Daily, the show where I, Rebecca, aka Crafting Journey, recap live trials for you today. And I have a good one. I just finished listening to the opening statements in the Parkland shooting trial of Scot Peterson. And that's not the Scot Peterson that probably pops into your head that killed his wife Lacey. This is Scot, Scot Peterson, who was a school resource officer at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School on February 14th of 2018 when 17 people were killed by Nicholas Cruz when he came onto the property with his AK AR, whatever, the AR-15, the assault rifle. Oh God, those things give me the creeps. And in any case, I have chills. I literally have chills listening to this. These attorneys are so good. The prosecution's opening was really good. The defense's opening was really good, to the point where the judge had to admonish him several times. In fact, at the end, he said, because you continue to violate, he kept sustaining the argumentative objections, objection, argumentative. He would tell the judge would say to the jury, listen, opening statements are they're designed just to show you what the evidence is going to show. They're not designed to argue. That's something you do during closing arguments. He admonishes him like 3, 4, 5 times. One time he brings him up to the bench, and finally he says, you're done. Wrap it up, because you can't stick to what you're supposed to stick to. And he was at the end anyway, so he wrapped it up. But man, very zealous defense attorney. Very zealous. One of those, this is the only way I can describe it. One of those guys who's like short, sort of the Napoleon syndrome. I worked for a guy like that. They're just really zealous. Anyway, so Scot Peterson is charged with 7 counts of child neglect and 3 counts of culpable negligence and 1 count of perjury. Child neglect? Yeah, child neglect. You're like, wait a minute. Didn't you say he was a school resource officer? Yeah, sworn police officer. And we'll get to that. So the prosecution's opening theme was one moment in time. And he said, that used to be a song. I don't remember that song. Not really. Anyway, I want to sing it, but I don't really know it. So he says that one moment in time can change everything. Yeah, it can. He said at 2:17 p.m., Nicholas Cruz pulls up in an Uber on February 14th of 2018, Valentine's Day. School ends at 2:40 p.m. Now, we all know Nicholas Cruz had gone to school there, and he was very familiar with the school. So he pulls up to, he's on he has the Uber on Pine Island Road. She pulls up, lets him out. He gets out, and he pulls out this big duffel bag, and he takes the sidewalk that's leading into building 12. Now, it wasn't locked down because school ends at 2:40, and the security specialists had been opening up the property so that when the kids are let out, they can leave the property. Parents can enter, kids can leave. So it was open. He gets in, he's walking towards the 1200 building. Now, there's a lot of east, west, north, south directions going on in these statements. So I was trying to pay very close attention, and as were the jurors. They get to take notes. They have notebooks. So at 2:20, he enters the east side of the building. This is a huge building. This building has 30 classrooms, 30, 10 on each floor. It has a teacher's lounge. It has offices. This is a very, very large building. So Nicholas Cruz enters on the first floor. Right before he enters the building, Martin Duquet, Luke Hoyer, and another person enter in front of him. The female that enters in front of Nicholas Cruz, she keeps on walking towards the west end of the building. Martin Duquet and Luke Hoyer stop where Gina Montaldo is sitting out in front of her classroom in this little alcove. She had gotten permission to go out there and study. So she's sitting there. So Martin and Luke are stopped there and they're talking to her and they're in this alcove. Well, that's the first place Nicholas Cruz goes. He shoots the three of them and he continues down the hallway towards the west end, shooting. Now, at this same moment in time, the defendant, the school resource officer assigned to Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, who had been there since 2009. He had been a police officer for 32 years and spent 28 of those years as a school resource officer, but only assigned to Marjory Stoneman Douglas since 2009. So that's a lot of years, 9 years he had been at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. And this high school, this campus is on 45 acres of land. It's huge. It's in an area of Broward County, Florida, known as Parkland. That's why they're calling it the Parkland shooting. And I will say Parkland is a very affluent area. So when I lived in Broward County, I didn't get up to Parkland very often. Actually, when I lived there, Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School was fairly new. That's how long we're going back. Yeah, fairly new. So at this time, well, Nicholas Cruz says he has shot the first three people. He's working his way down west. The school resource officer, the defendant, he is at the administrative building, building 1. And they had this big map or, poster board with the school and all the buildings, and you see building 12 up here, and there's all these buildings, and then building 1 where the administration is, and the SRO, the school resource officer, were down here. He gets the call that there are firecrackers. Now he's at his office, he's investigating a felony. He found a student with a fake driver's license, and the guy's father is on the way, but he gets a call over his radio that firecrackers are coming from building 12. So he gets another guy, another security specialist, and they saunter on out to the golf cart. They all have golf carts. Saunters on out to the golf cart, realizes we don't have keys to the golf cart. Like, were you supposed to bring a key? No, were you supposed to bring a key? Anyway, they don't have the key. So they're walking back, and then they're walking the opposite way, back to where they came from, probably to find the key. Another officer who had been by another not an SRO, one of the security specialists, had come from building 12, driven up to them, and they jump into that cart and head towards building 12. They go to the east end of building 12. Now, meanwhile, Nicholas is still shooting his way down the first floor. So he's at the west end of the first floor, going up to the second floor. Now, meanwhile, since the shooting has started, this massive amount of dust is falling from the ceiling, and that is setting off fire alarms. It set off the fire alarm. What happens when the fire alarm goes off is that the school office will shut it off until they know that there's an actual fire, because building 12 is probably one of the newest buildings at that school, and they had a new fire alarm, and it was just really loud and obnoxious. So they didn't know if there was really a fire or not, so they usually, their usual thing is to turn it off. Well, anyway, when that gets set off, That fire alarm sets off the fire alarm for the entire school. So now the kids are thinking it's a fire drill. So they're all making their way out of the building. So the kids that are heading down the west side of the stairwell see Nicholas Cruz and they run back up because he's making his way in that west stairwell up to the second floor. Then he gets to the second floor and he's making his way east back towards where the defendant is outside of the building. Now, he's standing out there and he makes several transmissions on his radio. I want to read some of the transmissions. I'm blending these statements together. Some of this came from the prosecution, some of this came from the defense, but they're and I couldn't see the entire board of the radio transmissions, but he says, be advised, we have possible, could be firecrackers. I think we have shots fired, possible shots fired in the 1200 building. Now, he doesn't know if that's in the 1200 building or outside of the building. So what he says during that transmission is 1200 building. He doesn't say in the 1200 building. He just says 1200 building. Then a few seconds later, he says, make sure we get some units over here. I need to shut down Stoneman Douglas, the intersection. He's got to get the school locked down. Then at 2:24, like 30 seconds later, he says, we're talking about the 1200 building. It is going to be the building off of Holmberg Road. Now, he's on his sheriff deputy radio, and he's talking with other officers. Then a few seconds later, we don't have a description yet. We just hear shots. Appears to be shots fired. Yeah. Then a few seconds later, he says, I'm over on the south side of the 700 building. So what happens is he never makes entry. He's out. He gets out of that cart, the one that picked up him and the other security specialist. He gets out of the cart at the 1200 building at the east door. He cannot tell where these shots are coming from. He does not know if it's a sniper shooting down towards the he just doesn't know. So he and this other officer run and I shouldn't say hide. They took a position between the building 7 and 8, and they maintained that position until 30 minutes after Nicholas Cruz is come and gone. They stay in that position. And there are more radio transmissions, but it's clear from those radio transmissions that this defendant has no idea where these shots are coming from. By the time they're I'm still going to go. I shouldn't say hiding. By the time they're in position between the 7th and the 8th, or building 7 and 8, Nicholas Cruz is at the top of the building on the 3rd floor, and the farthest, because he goes from east to west on the 1st floor, then from west to east, 2nd floor, then from east to west on the 3rd floor, shooting as he's going. And then he exits out of the west end of the building and blends into the students, and they don't even know that he's gone. It took the SWAT team, when they got to this scene, it took the SWAT team 30 minutes to clear this building. They had to go through every single classroom. They had to make sure that the shooter or shooters, nobody knew, is this one guy? Is it more than one guy? This building is 73 yards long. The defense put a video up showing the span from one end of this building to the other. It's massive. And he had asked the judge if they could take the jury out to the scene to view the outside of the building. The judge said no. No. I don't know why. And that I might add, that building is still standing for the limited purpose of this trial. Yeah, just in case they wanted to do a jury view, which they did do in the Nicholas Cruz case. They have never torn that building down. It remains in the same condition that it did the day that shooting happened. Balloons, balloons from Valentine's Day, flowers from Valentine's Day all over the floor, dried blood. I mean, it's the exact same as it was that day. They have plans to demolish the building, but they didn't want to do it until these court cases had resolved. So Nicholas Cruz's case has finished. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of the 17 people shot inside of that building and injuring 17 others. So the argument by the prosecution is by the time the defendant is outside of that east end of the building and doesn't go in, 10 people are already deceased. He's only charged with child neglect for the 7 other murders that occurred on the 3rd floor. And 3 counts of culpable negligence for the 3 people injured on the 3rd floor. The perjury stems from a few days later when the defendant is interviewed by the Broward Sheriff's Office, and he tells them, he's asked how many shots were fired. And he gave an answer, but the defense attorney said, well, he wasn't asked by, at this time or by this time, and it wasn't a specific enough question, and I don't know. That's why he's charged with perjury. So some other things that I found really interesting. Let me find out if I told you everything. At one point, one of the teachers, Scott Beagle, runs into the building from the west end, not where Scott Peterson, the defendant, is over on the east end. He runs into the building on the west end, and he is shot before he can even get into the door by Nicholas Cruz, and he falls outside of the door. So he's found by another staff member who's on the radio, and one of the transmissions from Scott Peterson is, ask him, where's the shooter? Yeah. This is a tough one, guys. This one is really, really tough. So this entire shooting of Nicholas Cruz lasts 6 minutes and 40 seconds. The last 4 minutes and 15 seconds of that 6 minutes and 40 seconds, prosecution argues Scott Peterson had an opportunity to enter that building armed and take out the shooter. The defense gets up and says, my client, not the defendant, my client was sacrificed. He was thrown under the bus. Yep. And I don't think he's wrong about this. I don't. And he talked a lot about the sheriff, the Broward County sheriff at the time. His name was Israel. His last name was Israel. And how this guy, Israel, and Scott Peterson were friends. But Israel's taken a lot of heat over the shooting. I mean, there's 17 people dead. 14 were children. He's taken some heat in the media, some big heat. So when he's asked, how come your school resource officer didn't go into the building? He's like, I don't know. That's a good question, So he needed a scapegoat, and he chose Scott Peterson. So then the defense puts up a picture of Nicholas Cruz, the worst one that he could find, because most of the pictures of Nicholas Cruz is very benign. He's just a weird looking fella. But this one, he looked kind of sinister and mean, and he says, this is the monster that is responsible for this shooting, not my client. My client didn't shoot anybody. He said, my client was an elite member of the Broward Sheriff's Department. He had been named Parkland's Deputy of the Year in 2012, School Resource Officer of the Year in 2015, and again in 2016, 2 years before the shooting. He had been named Parkland's Deputy of the Year again. Decorated. He says that we're going to hear from at least 6 other police officers, some of whom lost their jobs over this shooting, but got their jobs back. 6 other officers who also did not enter that building when they came on the scene. They all waited. They, just like that Uvalde thing, they stood back. They waited for SWAT to get there. And we may see some fallout from the Uvalde shooting against the officers that just stood there. But here we have it in this case. So we're going to hear from those officers about how they didn't enter the building either. What were they hearing? Where did they think it was coming from? Nobody really knew where this shooting was coming from. At one point, they were told it was coming from the football field. Now, I've already told you, this building is 73 yards long, 3/4 of a football field. And the football field is like 100 more yards in the other direction, west, way west of this building. So they really didn't know. So you're thinking, okay, so what about the people inside the building? You know, kids, every kid has a cell phone. Every kid, sometimes more than one. And they're on their phone. Hey, 911, we're in the building. There's a guy shooting. How come he didn't get it? How come no one told him? This is a shooter. The shooter's in the building. Those calls didn't go to Broward Sheriff's Office. Those calls were being routed to the Coral Springs Police Department. And Coral Springs was not communicating with Broward Sheriff's Office. So this is why Israel was taking some serious heat in the media, the sheriff, because the radios sucked at this time. We're going to hear from officers that described the radios as just big bricks that didn't really work. Yeah. So a lot of interesting things in there. Oh, here's the principal of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas on surveillance. She is seen not running, but walking with purpose into the bathroom where she stayed for the entire event in the bathroom. What do you think of that? Okay, what else did I not tell you? I think that's it. A lot of information, we're going to hear from a lot of witnesses, kids, officers, teachers, administrators, a lot of different officers, a lot of different witnesses on this case. So, wow. Like, let me just give you a flavor of the courtroom. This is in Broward County. I don't know if this is the exact same courtroom that they tried Nicholas Cruz in, because Nicholas Cruz was tried in front of Judge Elizabeth Scheer. She has since resigned her position as judge. She was heavily criticized during the Nicholas Cruz case for admonishing the defense the way she did. And it was really hard to watch when she did that. So this is a different judge. I always look at these lawyers and think, do I know them? Because I practiced in Broward County for many years, and I don't seem to know any of the ones involved in here. The other thing about the courtroom is there's a lot of family members. I recognize a lot of them from the Nicholas Cruz case. They were all there. And as far as the media, there was an attorney from the Sun Sentinel, which is the major newspaper that covers Broward County, just to make sure that there is no coverage of any, because the jury's going to hear those videos where the shots are fired, and they're going to see pictures of the dead, and it's going to be gruesome. And so the court did enter an order saying that none of that would be shown to the public or the media. But well, he actually said the media could see it, but it cannot be shown to the public. Yeah. He said if the media has access to it, because they can describe what being shown to the jury, but the actual photos and videos are not to be shown to the public. So no, not a bad ruling on that. So that's the opening. So they're having lunch now. I will watch the rest of this trial, the rest of today's trial, and I will update you tomorrow on how this turns out or how it's proceeding. So I will, it's Wednesday. Tonight is Craft With Me Wednesday. That's where I go live, and I'm going to put my diamond painting away. I'll show you. I've been working very hard on it. Thank you for still being here if you're still watching. Thank you. Okay, so I'm well into the dress now. Let me turn the light pad off. Yeah. So here's the little girl up here. There's her face, her hair, and this is her dress. So I'm well into the dress now. There's all the garden. It's called the Secret Garden. So tonight I will be watercolor painting flowers. So I will see you then. That's at 6:30. I hope to see you there. If not, I'll see you tomorrow on Crafting and Crime Daily for more of the Scot, Scot, Peterson trial, the Parkland shooting trial. Bye.